back to the Valley to Peak Nutrition Podcast. This is a unique episode because we recap my recent trip to Alaska where I went Dall sheep hunting with Limitless Alaska Guiding and Mark Rowenhorst up there. And so in this episode, Mark Schulsing from Exo Mountain Gear interviews me, and we had not talked prior to recording this episode about the trip at all. So a lot of what you're going to hear is conversation between he and I about the trip as a whole. And I think it's easy to, at least for me, record a trip like this and you're basically just sitting there and going back and bantering. But I think for Mark and I, it's important to capture the trip, but also try to incorporate some pieces of the trip with good information that may be helpful for everyone else who's planning to go on any type of hunts, whether it's in state, out of state, or what have you. So I think that you'll find pieces of that in here as well. And then, we talk about the days that we were in Alaska hunting Dall sheep and some of the stuff that went on there, and just the incredible experience that it was and that it is. So I hope you do enjoy it. It is a little bit of a longer one as we go through several different things and kind of how the trip came to be. It was a very unconventional trip. This isn't your typical book a sheep hunt 5 years in advance, train for it and get ready. I had about 12 weeks. It was a very last minute type of a thing that came on a cancellation, which is for a lot of people the way something like this is possible. And Mark and I, we dive into that in this as well. So yeah, I hope there's just lots of good things in here for you to take away and pieces of encouragement, as well as even some entertainment, being able to relive the story that we just experienced. So without further ado, here is a recap with Mark and I of my 2024 Dall sheep hunt.
You want to go into how the hunt came about a bit, and then any pre-hunt stuff? Or
yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that, yeah. And I even thought about writing this because, I'm recording now, so this may make it in there, but your average person is going to think of a Dall sheep hunt, or any hunt for that matter, as being this massive bill. And it would have been, but that massive bill was, chipped away at a lot because it was cancellation. So
let's go into it. I remember what's interesting about the backstory is I was there for it and watched it happen in real time, and was probably a bit like you, somewhat sitting there oh, we this came up and we all chuckled, and then it went from all of us chuckling to there's a real possibility of something happening here. And then that only got serious a little bit over an hour or two, but then it was okay, I'll go to bed and see what happens the next day. And then what happens a week later, and how that unfolded. But you retell it. It was fun for me to be a part of.
yeah, so I think the place that I always start whenever people have asked about it is, usually when you read story recaps on Rockslide, or, if you go to a wild sheep banquet or whatever, people talk about dreaming of hunting sheep their whole life. And for all the reasons, as far as the extent of a trip, sheep hunts usually are longer. Price of sheep hunting, all of these things, it was so far outside the realm of possibility to me. It would have been like me dreaming of driving a Lamborghini. It's never going to happen. So I didn't have this great anticipation. But Idaho's a unique state in the sense of you could potentially hunt sheep as a resident, which makes it a lot more cost effective. So over the last couple of years, I would even say maybe the last 18 months, I started to get interested in sheep anyway, thinking, and my actual thought, I don't think I've ever told you this, but my actual thought was the only hope that I've probably got of going on a sheep hunt would be some wild random draw, and or equally as wild and random, Mark inviting me on one that he goes on, or Steve, or whoever, right? Someone else gets one, asks me to come along, is to help pack meat, camp, whatever, which I would have gladly have done. So yeah, the backstory is that we had all gone on a trip in May with our spouses to celebrate the 10th anniversary of the death hikes. And so we're sitting on the back porch everyone's relaxed, no kids. It was it was great. Ambitions were down, or whatever word that is, were down.
Inhibitions.
Inhibitions were down,
Yeah.
and it started as like the spouses joking about like, well, what can we buy since you guys go on some of these more expensive trips? And I remember Sky, which is Jeff's wife, saying she wanted a freeze dryer, and like everyone went around in a circle. So Lindsay's on my left, Mark Rowan Horse, who we call Henry, was there with his wife, and he was on my right. And I'd asked Lindsay, I said, what would it take for you? What would you want to buy for me to be able to go on a sheep hunt? And she's never, like, she's always encouraged me to go hunt. She's never been like upset whenever that time of year comes around. She's very giving, in that regard. So not knowing what she was getting herself into, she thought this was any other hunt. So she's like, well, you can go on a sheep hunt. Like, I don't care about that. So the banter goes back and forth, and we start discussing some of the logistics. And Henry, who's on the right, he's like, well, actually, I've got a cancellation hunt this year if you were interested. And it started as just like this wild idea and joke, but then I continued to ask questions, and he kept giving me answers that made me not completely turn it down. You were next to us, and you're kind of saying like, dude, it doesn't get any better than this. Like, that's the worst enabling environment on the face of the planet, when you're on the porch with, I think, 19 other guys who hunt and their spouses, and they're hearing this, and they're all like, dude, if you
Yeah.
really think this is something you want to do, you should do it. So anyway, long story short, I end up telling Henry, I'm like, let me get out of here and actually talk to Lindsay about what this looks like. And then, you finish your vacation, because they were staying longer, and I'll give you a call next week. Time goes on. We board a flight. On the flight home, I've got Wi-Fi, and he sends me 27 to 30 pictures of sheep and this country that he had been in before. And it just looks like this, I mean, a spectacular experience. And we've been to Alaska before, and it's hard to describe. It's just hard to describe what it's like to be there, and the desire to go back is only once you go once, you just want to go back. So we come home, Lindsay and I talk about it and talk about the logistics and all of the different things that are involved, and she highly encourages me to go, basically saying, look, if this is something you want to do, this is probably the only opportunity you're going to get to do it. You should do it. So, me, anybody else that knows me, haul, process, make a list of pros and cons, back and forth. I'm texting Henry, and he says there's another guy that could be potentially interested. Long story short, Lindsay grabs my phone and commits for me. So I went outside, was working in the yard one night, and she said, basically, you're going. I told him that you would go. So booked the hunt, and yeah, from early May to mid May, I found myself from just having your average fall hunt plans to going on a sheep hunt.
It's such a one thing that stands out to me because that came up when we were on this trip. And as you said, it's pretty much all death hike guys who, all those guys hunt, right? And I had been talking with Henry, and something came up super casually about the fact that he had this cancellation. And he's like, yeah, there's this one guy who may be interested, whatever. And I was like, well, if you get serious about wanting to try and fill it, you're shooting fish in a barrel. Like, there's 20 plus guys here with us this week. I guarantee you could fill this hunt. But it was kind of a joke, but I was also serious because I knew it probably would happen. But then the fact that it came up the way that it did unintentionally, like he wasn't pitching it to fill it and whatever, it came up in a very, uh, I guess, natural way. Like you said, kind of joking, was pretty funny. But it really strikes me now. I went the year prior, and it was also April or May when I found out I was going, which is a weird timeline with sheep hunt. 'Cause like you said, most guys are planning these things for years and
Yeah,
decades.
years.
So I found out in April or May, and then also was going through a house move and a bunch of other stuff that summer, and then went on a sheep hunt. And it turns out you did both of those things, found out in April or May, and then personal behind the scenes Kyle, like going through some house changes. I never put both of those together that we did that back to back. That's weird.
And I didn't know at the time that he had, I mean, evidently a lot of the guys that were on this trip with us had known about it. And after the fact, like multiple people had said, if I didn't have X, Y, and Z, I was going to do it. So it's truly just a godsend that it happened. But I think it's like one of the things I think it's worth pointing out is I don't know if this is even relevant, but I feel like I should talk about it because it's the elephant in the room. Sheep hunting is expensive. It's really expensive. I was at the Idaho Sheep Banquet last year, and there was a Northwest Territories Dall sheep hunt that went for 86 grand in the auction, and your average sheep hunt is 30, $40,000.
Hmm.
I did not pay even a remote fraction to that because it was a cancellation. And I say all of that to say this, like, if these big hunts are something you think you want to do, it is really worth thinking about that, getting on a
Hmm.
cancellation, and you could go for a lot less than usual. But it also points to the fact of like something that you've talked about so much on the XO podcast and we've talked about here, the like the importance of being in a condition that allows you to say
Hmm.
yes. It's not to say like I was the strongest person on the mountain or that I was the apex of physical condition, but it and I did have to change my training and I did have to work towards getting there. But there was a big difference between, okay, well, this is going to take the next 12 weeks or the next 12 months or 3 years. And I think I just feel like that's important to point out because for a lot of people that hear sheep hunting, they're just like, oh, no way, absolutely no way I'll be able to participate in that. And there is, but there are, some caveats and to be thrown like, in April, well, in May and say, hey, in three
Hmm.
months or so, this is going to happen. To be able to say yes it was awesome. So yeah, it was small lifetime chance, and to your point, yes, we put our house on the market. It sold in 5 days. So like I had planned all these preparations, and that quickly got changed as like all of our attention turned on trying to get our stuff out of the house and all of these different things. But I think that that was good because my overly analytical brain would have been looking at the maps and looking at routes and looking at weather and looking at snow and looking at all of these different things. And, who knows what I would have talked myself into or out of prior to that, but I didn't have time. So what I did
Hmm.
do, and I think this is another helpful tip, you and Steve have talked about this before as well on your guys' podcast, was I essentially created a calendar for myself, like different benchmarks that I needed to be at for shooting, reloading, food preparation, training, etc. And so even though I couldn't sit there and put all this attention to it, I had my calendar and I knew, look, as long as you are to this point by this date, you're still on track. Even if you don't feel really engaged in the process or whatever, you will be ready when it comes time to go. And I definitely was. Probably even more so than in the years where I've got a bunch of time to sit there and think about it and develop game plans, etc. So
Hmm.
I think that that was another huge help was thinking about where I needed to be and what needed to be done, the time that I had, and to go backwards and start planning, at what date do I need to be at this point to make sure I'm ready, the rifle's ready, my food's ready, my gear if I need anything is all ready to go. And then yeah, sure enough, August 24th came quick, very
Hmm.
quick, and loaded up and went.
The other thing about that, like putting those dates down, setting that calendar, working backwards, is through that process, you're identifying the things that truly matter and the things that don't, or you're at least ignoring the things that don't, right? So you're on a crunch for time. You have to look ahead and say, I have 12 weeks or 16 weeks or whatever. What are the most important things that need to be done? And it's some training, it's some shooting. Yes, it's some gear, but what's not on that calendar and what you didn't waste a bunch of time was like reading too much or over analyzing too much or window shopping too much or wasting too much time on the things that don't matter because you've already said I don't have too much time. Here's what matters. Here's when I'm going to do it. And so that's naturally where all of your focus goes and you ignored because you had to a lot of stuff that maybe if you had more time you would have and quote unquote invested in, but was probably all in all reality a waste of time, if that makes sense.
You're 100% right. And like I'm particularly guilty of window shopping, like selling gear I have to try to get what I think is most optimized. But in this, it was like I just didn't have time to deal with it. So what I had was what I had and what was going with me, you know. And anytime I've taken that approach, it's like you always end up just figuring it out, and it's so much more enjoyable than you think I'd learn this, but it's so much more enjoyable than all the analysis. And you know, I can't think of any time the over analysis and all of the, you know, all of the different checkmates and switches and gear or whatever approaches training have paid off, right? And so, in a lot of ways, it was really freeing to not have the time and just to be able to go.
Yeah. I want to pull out too, because people who know you, have listened to your podcast, know your story, know this. Maybe there'll be some new listeners on this that don't know it. I know there will be the case because guys who get interested in like sheep hunting will go search sheep hunting podcasts or whatever. So I know people be hearing this, won't know your whole story. But going back to you were talking about like kind of that capability of always being ready or close enough to ready that on short term you could go from zero idea I'm going sheep hunting to 3 months later I'm going sheep hunting and doing that very effectively physically. That's not your backstory. So again, if you extrapolate the long term, people also, as you said, write off these ideas, and it doesn't have to be sheep hunting, but whatever thing comes to mind for someone that they say, I would really want to someday, but I can't because of X, Y, or Z. Go back 10 years, Kyle, chubby guy from Indiana. There is zero comprehension that if we were to transport back in time, we could say, "Oh, Kyle, in 10 years, your life's gonna look like this, your fitness is gonna look like this, your capabilities are gonna look like this, and you're gonna go do this amazing sheep hunt in Alaska." There would be, I'm assuming, 0% probability that you would have realized that as a reality, but that's where you're at over the course of life change.
It's that's an interesting thought. So you know, came back and had mentioned about the hunt or whatever, and someone had chimed in and said, "Could you imagine what that guy would have said, you know, 15 years ago or whatever?" And the thought that I had was that guy would have been so repulsed by the idea of doing anything like that because it was hard that it's almost even hard to fathom. But you're right. And I didn't expect this because I've gone on plenty of hunts in the mountains or whatever. But when I was up there in particular, it sort of hit me that because we were way back there, it sort of hit me and dawned on me that I would have never been able to not only participate in the hunt, but been able to see what I saw if I wouldn't have changed that, you know, however many years ago it was. So it's interesting that you pull that out because it was a very real thought to me when it's not been before. And yeah, 100%. It's allowed me not just this hunt, but it's allowed me to do and see things that never would have been able to do and see otherwise.
Awesome. Do you want to dive into the hunt or do you want to talk any pre-hunt, last minute, figuring out which boots to wear, whatever, any sort of those
Uh,
issues?
we can if you want, but I think diving into the hunt. Yeah, we can dive into the hunt because some of that stuff will
Let's do
probably
it.
come up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I set aside 2 weeks basically to be gone because we had to close on the house. So it was sort of a hard stop date, but flew out of Boise on Saturday, August 24th. And so I had talked with you because I don't think I've ever flown out of state for hunt. We've flown for death hikes and stuff like that, but I don't think so for hunt. So, you know, I've checked firearms before, you know, to transport some that my dad had back home when he passed away, but I've never hunted with them. So, talked with you a little bit about like what's the best strategy here for packing to get the rifle, gear, etc. to me in Alaska. So you suggested taking all the foam out, putting your rifle in a soft case, and then packing clothes around it. So I had done that. I had heard mixed reviews on putting air tags in your luggage because, like, on one point, it tells you where it's at, but like that doesn't really do a whole lot for the airline because there's so many bags. So I stuck one in there anyway, and we weren't even off of the tarmac, and I could see that my rifle was still in the front of the Boise airport. And I was
Uh,
like, oh, Lord, already I'm going to have to deal with this. So we take the flight, land in Seattle, and I call Alaska baggage claim in Boise. And they were on it. I mean, quickly on it, and ended up, long story short, they ended up getting it, make sure that it was out on the next flight. But there was some time in there for a few hours where no one could find it. Like all it said was it was showing me in my Alaska Air app, which was baggage is checked. And that's all it kept showing them. So everyone's initial comment was just file a claim, just file a claim. And I'm thinking, file a claim? You want me to just file a claim? Like that doesn't sound, real hopeful as far as filing claims. So I kept checking the air tag and it kept saying Boise, kept saying Boise. I landed in Alaska, still says Boise. Finally, it updates to a neighborhood in Seattle, right? Like, so I get the air tag ping that it's in Seattle and it's in a neighborhood that I can see. Call Alaska Air again. They say, long story short, they end up telling me we have cargo air holding areas until certain packages can get shipped where it'll be held there rather than sitting at the
mhm.
airport and then shipped over. Long story short, they were on it and it arrived a couple hours after I'd got there. So the AirTag in the end, I will probably always use one just so for, just for my own knowledge, even if there's not a lot that I could do. But I do think that it was helpful in the sense of I could tell that it was still in Boise. So when I called, I told them the description of the hard-sided case, told them where it was at, told them, all of that, and they were quick to get it out and get it up to me. So I was really appreciative to them and really impressed how quick they acted.
Yeah. But on this side, it's easy. Like, but in the moment, yeah, very stressful start to the travels and all that for sure. Dang.
Yep. So land in Alaska, get the bags. Mark and his wife Sarah, who and their two boys, um, were so gracious to me. They typically do not want smelly hunters who eat a lot stay at their house for understandable reasons because he's a guide. This is his business. It's not like he's just, a guy who lives up there. This is what he does for a living. But because we knew them and we spent time with them together on that trip for the death hike, they were very gracious about letting me stay there, and they, which I think you can attest to as well, bent over backwards to make me feel welcome. So we got to Henry's house, hung out with them, met the kids, and then we went over to go shoot the rifle. And the rifle was perfectly on. I was a massive skeptic, but still on after being tossed between who knows how many flights, which I was thrilled about. And at that point, we were ready to go hunting. So we were going to be
Yeah.
heading out Monday, August 26th was going to be our first day.
So here's a question for the nutrition guy, Kyle Camp. Standard protocol for his hunts is he will include all food for you as the hunter. So you don't have to travel up there with any food. You can get there and he doesn't force you to take anything. He essentially has a buffet of backpacking food, and then you can show up and grab a gallon-sized Ziploc and like start building your days or what have you out of all this food that he has. When I've done that with him twice now on two hunts, it's a lot of it's very similar to the ways I would pack. And I kind of mentioned that to you of like, bring something if you have a specific thing that you really want. But I think you'll find that what he has available to help fill in gaps would work for you. But you're the planner, you're the nutrition guy. Like this is what you do. I'm curious, did that end up working out okay for you?
Yeah, I mean, to the point of where some of the stuff I did bring, I was like, this is stupid. I didn't even want to bring it. I wanted to take what he had just for variety, to be honest. But yeah, it worked out awesome. So he essentially goes to Costco and buys stuff, but he has perfect bars brought in, and he's also got the Big Sur bars. So like I opened the freezer and there's cases of Big Sur, and I'm like, I mean, those things are wonderful if
So
you've never
good.
had them. So I did bring like a breakfast granola, which was really good. And it's not that what he had I wouldn't have eaten. I would have, it would have been equally good, but I did really enjoy that. And then I brought some of the muffins that you make. So not the Audrey bars, but the other ones. Which my thought there was yours are a lot more dense. And this being a hunt, like it was the first real hunt where I thought, because we were going in 12 days. So it was the first hunt where I thought, I have to be at least cognizant of weight. I can't just walk around carrying, 5 pounds per day. Number one, like I don't have a bag big enough to fit that. Number two, that's a lot of weight going in for 12 days. So I wanted some stuff that was more dense. That was also why I decided to not bring my own dinners and go with his, because all of the dehydrated meals that I make are like fairly lean, fairly low in fat. But he had cases of peak. And so those are, my standard backpacking meal is going to be 400 or 500 calories, and your standard peak is going to be 11, 12 plus. So
Hmm.
I thought I'm gonna lean on those and lean on the dense muffins to try to get my calories in, as opposed to taking, tons and tons and tons of weight. So but yes, to your point, I could have easily just went with what he had and been more than fine.
Was there, not just on food, was there anything else that stood out to you? I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm not aware if you've ever done a 10 plus day hunt, right? And packed for that at one time. So what else stood out to you about going, hey, I'm going to be self-sufficient for the next 12 days with just what I have on my back?
Yeah, that's a good question. A couple of my standard quote luxury items, because you're right. I mean, we've done some longer hunts, but we've had stock, like we've had mules and we've had horses, and they take the brunt of, if not all of the weight for the most part. And I've done some shorter backpack stuff. And so on those, like some of my like luxury things, I like to bring like a pair of socks to change into at night, or a lightweight pair of long john pants to change into, just to like get out of my stuff. On this, I was like, I'm sleeping in what I've got. I'm not packing extra clothes. I'm bringing like bare minimums, both for space and for weight. And I mean, of course, like not only did it work fine, but it was really nice to not have to freeze every time I wanted to get out of my bag and change. It's just, so I think in the future, honestly, I probably will stop bringing some of those luxuries. But I sent you a message right before we left. I was like, sent you a picture of the bag and the pack and said, every single one of my fears is in here. And I guess that to some degree, I should have said every single one of my fears that I could fit in here are in here. But there was a lot that there was a lot that wasn't. It's interesting. Like it's interesting now to look back at it and think, when you are really limited on weight and space because of the number of days that you have, you pack your fears because you're worried and you're mapping out every contingency. But when space and weight and all of these things are limited, it's your brain almost goes to figure it out. I mean, I don't know. I can't take it, and I'll figure out whatever happens. And I think
Hmm.
the cool part about that is now that I've done that, it will probably condense what I need even more on shorter trips too.
My brain's processing all that because I've experienced that, but maybe not put the words around that. And yeah, part of where my head just goes is it's very like it's discussed in many ways. How as you gain more experience, you end up probably taking less stuff. And part of that is you just start with way too much in the beginning because you're packing your fears. Or I've talked many times for many years about, you know, if guys are uncomfortable letting go of some things, like play the three strikes and you're out game, meaning if you take something on 2 or 3 trips, you haven't touched it or haven't needed it, and it's not a critical life-saving item. Like I'm not saying do this with first aid or fire starters, of course, but other things. I'll be like, okay, like take 2 knives for the first time or 2 times, but like prove to yourself over a couple trips you don't actually need this thing or that thing or what have you. But that's different than forcing yourself into kind of what you were just describing of living on almost as little as possible or having as little as possible. And then realizing not only were these things not extras or maybe just a luxury item, but I just like you flat out realize there's almost some benefits to not having some of the things. Not that they were superfluous, but just, oh, it's really okay without these things, you know?
I think 100% right. And one of the things that was interesting to me was like it's almost more freeing not having 100 things to manage,
For
right? Like
sure.
even having an additional pair of leggings to change into or socks or whatever, like you're rummaging through your pack trying to find it, it's buried at the bottom, like and just to know there's nothing there, just get in, just go to bed
Yep.
is nice, and it gives you the opportunity just to honestly, as stupid as this is going to sound, just to care less. You just don't care.
Hmm.
There's nothing there to care about. Now, one thing I did do that I did intentionally take that was heavier was my stove. So I took my jet boil and I've got a micro mo, which I think is so there's two. There's a mini mo and a micro mo. The mini mo is like more of a bowl, whereas the
Hmm.
micro is more of like the old sole, like the SOL titanium sole. I took that instead of like my cup and MSR wind burner because of the fuel efficiency, thinking it's not doesn't make a lot of sense to take a stove setup that burns more fuel and two canisters than one canister and a more fuel efficient stove. This was also why I went with that granola breakfast, is because I didn't want to have 100 cans of fuel to be cooking every single meal. I wanted to be able to cover coffee and to be able to cover dinner at night, and that was about it.
So you were cold soaking that granola breakfast?
I didn't even soak it, honestly.
Just
I,
add it
I
and mix it.
yeah, I put it
Yeah.
in. I ate it a lot of times. I would just so I vac sealed it, and a lot
Hmm.
of times I just would pour the water right in the container and eat out of that.
Yeah.
But then there were other times where I took the jet boils come with that little plastic cup that
Hmm.
serves no purpose except for a cereal bowl. So sometimes I would pour some
Oh.
of that in there and then drink, because I like to have the coffee straight out of the jet boils because it stays hot versus
Yeah.
something else I would always do is bring another mug. And
Hmm.
this time I'm just drinking straight out of the jet boil, which some people have said is, a disgrace to backcountry, but it was simple. I loved it.
Yeah. All right, we're getting cut and nerdery. I want to jump to the hunt and what point did it feel real? Like, oh crap, this is real. I'm in Alaska. I'm hunting sheep. Just because I'm sure that there was some point where it was like the reality of it hit you after traveling, after loading your pack, after all that stuff. Like, at what point was like, okay, here we go, adventure.
Yeah, so he had told me even when we were talking about this when we were on the vacation, he sent me the pins to where he wanted to go. And it looked like a haul, but it didn't look, unbearable. I mean, it wasn't unbearable still, but it was a haul. So, we this was entirely walk in. There was no flying, nothing like that at all. And if anyone's kind of been to Alaska, or I guess if not, you are generally starting out in the bottom somewhere and having to work your way through willows and trees and what looks almost more like a rainforest than anything else. And eventually you make your way up to like a tundra, and then if you keep going, you kind of get into the alpine. So we were hiking in. So the first day was about we hiked for 6 or 7 hours and eventually made our way to the tundra. And I think that's the point where it was like, we're here. Now, a lot of that had to do with the fact that the tundra, there's nothing else that looks like the tundra. So when you're there, there's no frame of reference other than I'm in Alaska. It's not like I look at it and think, oh, this kind of feels like Idaho, or this kind of feels like
Hmm.
where it's like, this is Alaska. The other piece of that is blueberries are everywhere. Like you're walking on them and they're huge and they're thick and they're great and they're delicious and they're all of those things. The second thing was there were caribou feeding everywhere. I mean, there was caribou where we were at, kind of down lower in the tundra. And so you're seeing all of these things that are like quintessential Alaska. And I think that that's the point where it's like, we're not even two sheep country at this point. We're still quite a ways off. But at that point, it was very much like, almost like, all right, well, adventure starts now. So yeah, it was surreal. I'll never forget it. I'll never forget where we camped. It was an awesome first night. Evidently so awesome that the next day Henry was like, I was talking to you and you fell asleep last night. He's like, you passed out. So I don't even remember what he had asked me, but I vaguely remember him saying something, but I slept great that
Yeah,
night. So yeah, that was the end of day one.
nice. So it was you and Henry, and then there was a packer along as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, a guy named Chris who has packed for a lot of years up in Alaska. He did some junior guiding with another outfit up there, and he and Henry are acquaintances, fairly recent acquaintances, and so he came as well. But he was awesome, huge help, and I feel like I told Henry and him at the beginning because Henry's my guide, right? I mean, he's the one I'm paying, just like any other guide, etc. Even though he's a friend, he said, "Do not treat me like a client. Do not fetch my water. Don't do any of that for me. Just treat me like I needed a guide. You're a friend. I paid you, whatever, right?" And it
Mhm.
was very much like that. I very much felt like that the entire trip. I did not want to feel like a client or catered to in any way. I really wanted it to be like just any other hunt with good friends, and I happened to be the guy who had the sheep tag, and that's what it felt like. So yeah, it was great group dynamic the whole time, which of course makes the experience just awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, the only hunts I've done with a guide are with him, and because they're legally required, mountain goat and sheep. And I've, expressed the same to him. And obviously that I've spent more time with him, have, uh, gotten more used to hunting with him and him with me. So if it does feel like just hunting with a friend and you're just out there together, I still seems, I wouldn't know what to do on a quote unquote like typical guided hunt where they're, treating you with kid gloves or like trying to
Yeah,
take care of your every need or making every decision without like informing you or talking through things with you. And yeah, I don't know how that would just seems like it would feel really odd.
yeah. No, I just I don't know. I mean, for me, it's the whole experience and to go out there and just be like catered to. I don't get that, and I just don't really have any interest in. I just don't have any interest in that at all. I want it to mean something, and it did.
It's cool. What was um what was weather like or forecasted to be for the week? Were there any concerns there?
Yeah, well, there was initially because they had gotten, I mean, a lot of Alaska for the sheep opener, which opens August 10th, had gotten a lot of precipitation, which means there's a lot of snow in the mountains. So I think that that was less than ideal, and conditions looked like, lo and behold, every Alaska range is was wet. It was supposed to rain. Now, to this point, like we're at the end of day one, we had great weather hiking in. We woke up that next morning on day two. The wind was going pretty good. We knew that they were calling for a lot of wind that day and potentially some rain in the afternoon, but there was rain early in the morning and the wind was moving pretty good. Now, like so we didn't lollygag, but we weren't necessarily fast about getting up that day because we knew we had a big day ahead of us to get to where we wanted to go. Ended up packing up camp, rain stopped, and we started hiking. And that wind is the most, like the only word that comes to mind, violent wind I've ever personally hunted in that day. So we had a headwind nearly that entire day of what, like I would guess 40 miles an hour or so. And you're typically trying to take a ridge line up. If you're ever
Mhm.
climbing up, you're trying to catch a ridge because it's going to be path of least resistance, and there is nothing up there to protect you, and so you're just taking it, and so, but I wanted that, I think it would
Right.
have been if I think it would have been you would have missed an element of it had you not got that. Now, I will say, and I can only say this now, having had been there and gotten out, we had probably, I mean, it was the best weather you could possibly ask for when there. The only time that it rained, aside from that morning, was on the pack out. I
Oh
mean,
wow.
there were days when it was a little bit cloudy. We'd get little bitty drizzles, but I didn't actually pull my rain gear out until we packed out, which
Hmm.
is, of course, unheard of. Like
And
the
no
irony,
like
what was
other
that?
like fog or visibility issues or anything either.
No, no, I mean, nothing. There was some fog at some points, but no visibility to the point of where you could never, you could never glass at all.
That's amazing.
I know. So you could see like whenever we were in certain locations, there'd be rain all around us, but none on us. And it was just truly like the best conditions you could potentially hope for up there. That day that was really windy was, fairly, that was fairly challenging. And then on the pack out, fairly challenging. But aside from those couple of days, weather wise, it was good.
Awesome. So the goal for day two, keep hiking, push further in, get closer to sheep country, is the goal to be potentially glassing like that evening and be quote unquote in sheep country, or what does that look like?
I think Henry thought potentially 3 days to get in there, which I was
Okay.
fine with and knew going into it. And he kind of told me that up front, but I wanted to see everything. I wanted to hike it. I wanted to see it. I wanted to experience it. And so we're 12 days with gun, water, everything. My pack's, somewhere between 70, 75 pounds trying to get up into that country. So the game plan the second day was just to try to get as far in as we could and then stop whenever we needed to. And I think that day we hiked somewhere between 10 and 12 hours. And about the 10th hour, 8th, ninth, 10th hour, we're all pretty tired because the packs are heavy. It's a lot of climbing, but we had weather, we had daylight. And so, Mark and I just kind of talked and decided just go. We can rest tomorrow. We can, we'll be in sheep country. We can glass from there. We don't have to get up crazy early. We have the weather. We have daylight. There's no reason to not keep going, even if we're tired. So we did, and we did end up making it to where we wanted to set up camp. And like I said, I think it ended up being like a 10 or 12-hour day. But went to bed that night, just really excited to wake up the next day and start glassing for seeing what was around us and start glassing for sheep.
That's awesome. Those, I was in Alaska, a week-ish, 10 days before you were on this trip, and those are long days up there, man. Like we spent that caribou hunt, there's certain days we just packed meat for what felt like 16 hours, but they're just, if you get up remotely close to sunrise and like make a full day close to sunset, which is, you got usable light till past 11 a.m. where we were, or sorry, 11 p.m. And
Yeah.
you can put in some good long hard days in
Yeah.
August in Alaska for sure.
And everything there, like when you look at hiking statistics on a map and you look at mileage and you look at elevation, you think, oh, that's not that bad. Everything there is harder. Walking
Hmm.
through the tussocks and, you know, which can range from just like jumping over the tops of little balls to your leg dropping 2 feet. So for me, I feel like I'm hurtling in the Olympics, the whole time trying to get through blueberry bushes and trying to jump between these. We had some snow up high, and it's just awesome. It's awesome, but it
Yeah.
is definitely just more challenging country to move through. So by the end of that, we weren't trying to set any land speed records. It was just slow, methodical movement most of the day. Stop and eat every so often, stop and get something to drink every so often, 5 minutes here, 5 minutes there, and you're constantly moving. So yeah, by the time that you do make camp, we were tired. We were ready to stop and get to bed.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, you can't go out. It's a long day at a moderate pace. You can't push too hard too quick when you're talking a 12-day hunt in that country. You just blow yourself up.
Yeah, and I think that that's the. I mean, I'll talk more about Henry and just how he is as a guide in a little bit, but I think that that's something that really was obvious was the longevity of it because you get ambitious, you want to get up there, you want to start hunting. There is a you could fall prey to the idea that you're wasting time, but you have to, like, I had to remind myself, and you have to remember that there's 10 more days here, and there's going to be a lot of climbing. So save the reserves for when you need them and take advantage of the opportunity for going slower and potentially having a recovery day and glassing all day tomorrow rather than, oh, there's sheep, let's go. It's like, it's a very methodical chess game. And I enjoyed that. I enjoyed that piece of it.
That's cool. So what did you wake up to day three then?
Yeah, day three. Yeah, so day three, gosh, sorry, I think about him and like I'll talk a little bit about him as a guide, but we wake up and we glass and we're on a long ridge, a really long ridge, and you have 360 degrees of panoramic view from this ridge. You could see zero sheep and be completely satisfied that you're probably in the most breathtaking place you've ever seen in your life. Alaska is beautiful. That's true of whenever we did the death hike. That's true of any time I've ever seen it up there. It's just 360 degrees of like just complete beauty. But we weren't there for beauty. We were there for sheep. So he's glassing and, he immediately picks up sheep. Most of these are lambs and ewes, but you can see that some are rams. They're still so far though that you have no real idea what type of rams they are. But for me, other than whenever we did the death hike, I'd never seen sheep. I'm just like, let me see the lambs, let me see the ewes, let me see anything that's breathing because, it's like it's all new to me. So really, really long story short, to condense the day down, he, I would, I mean, he glassed all day. Like he was just, it was like his personal mission to find every single sheep that he could. And, I've been a part of hunts and mule deer is the same way. But there's always periods, even for the guy who's holding the tag, where like you're sleeping or you're eating. He was not. I mean, he was constantly in there trying to find every potential nook and cranny that might hold sheep, or maybe sheep he didn't see earlier that might be out now. And so there was on a hill that's closest to us, there was a group of about 10 or 11 lambs and ewes, no rams. So he glasses, it's getting late, and he does the classic, I'm just going to go over here and I'm going to look over this hill one more time. We'll get our stuff. We'll head back to camp. And Chris and I were going to go down and get water. So we had to drop to go get water. And he was going to, glass over this hill. So he goes over, he starts to glass. Chris and I start to make our way down. And no sooner than we gathered the hydro packs to go get water, he comes like galloping back over. He's like, we've got new ones. And so he goes over, we follow him over, he's glassing them. It's 5 new ones, 5 rams. And it's like the classic thing that you see, especially for sheep, where he's looking at him in the spotter and he like looks at me and he's smiling. He's like, we should get closer tomorrow, which is basically synonymous with there's some potential legal rams in there. So for anyone who's not familiar, the ram has to be 8 years old or full curl. It has to meet criteria. You can't just go in there and, do anything you want if you see a sheep. There's really specific criteria with high fines if you violate that. So we're ecstatic at this point. And in that group of 5, there's 2 that you can tell are definitely sublegal. I mean, I still don't know even a remote fraction of what he does, but you could look at him and tell like their horns are more of like a banana shape as opposed to more of a full circle. But there's 3 other ones who definitely pass banana and look like they've got potential, which means you really need to go get closer to investigate to see if they're legal or not. So pack up, head back to camp and make dinner and start putting together a game plan for day 4.
And how far-ish away were they?
But they were over 1,000, but not miles.
Okay. Gotcha.
Yeah. Well, as the crow flies, right? I mean, by the time you
Right.
talk about, yeah.
Yeah. Where's your headspace that night then?
And this is one of the things I'll speak to about him being a guide, a great guide, is Normally, when you see a potential legal opportunity, for whatever it is that you're hunting, you start to get excited. How you going to make a play? And your anxieties, your nerves, for a lot of people, will, including me, will start to ramp up a little bit. Excitement. But for me, he told me early, he was like, they're all sublegal until they're not, which means like down to the minute, they're all sublegal until they're not. So for me, it was like, we're going to go sheep viewing tomorrow. That's great. I mean,
Hmm.
I could care at that point as much as, yeah, I want to do, fill a tag and have a great hunt. I was as interested as seeing sheep as I was anything else. So for me, I'm thinking, great, more country to go explore, different side of the mountain. We get to go see sheep up close. Like, what is there to be nervous about? So we go to bed that night. Game plan is to get up early the next day. This is day 4, and glass to see if they're still there. If they're still there, then we'll start to make our way over. So we get up, have breakfast, go over. They're all 5 still there, all 5 still in relatively the same place, all 5 bedded in the worst spot possible to try to get over to them. All 5 of them bedded in angles so specific that, it's like they have to be able to see every square inch of, that valley. Like they're so awesome to watch because they will strategically position themselves in a way that's like every square inch of that valley is covered, so that if anything moves, one will be alerted, and the whole band will be up and gone. So put together a game plan to make our way over there, which basically means we're going to have to drop off the back of this, hug the base of the hill that they're on to try to stay out of view, work up valley, and then decide if we want to go over the top to get closer or, kind of straight at them. So we do that. We start to work up valley, and they
Sorry,
had
can I interrupt
positioned.
you?
Yes.
Are you're not carrying camp or anything? This is just like,
So we had that conversation of, do we pack up camp or do we leave it? Because we're moving far enough, and it's a big enough investment to drop off of here and go climb and go down, that it's not going to be much fun to get back up to it. I think that Chris was kind of ambivalent. I think Mark kind of wanted to take camp, and he asks me, and I said, I think we should leave it so that we can just go as light as possible and waste little time. Because at this point, it's like, by the time we eat glass, it's like 9:30, 10 in the morning. We would have had to pack camp, and at this point, we're 4 days in, so the packs are still fairly heavy. Drop down, either make camp or drop it all off. And it's just, I don't know.
mhm.
I don't know. It's what I went for.
Yeah.
So we get down to the bottom, and we hug in the base of the hill, and he's like, I wish we would have brought camp. And we start working our way up this valley. It was, the clouds had sort of parted, the sun was out, so the rams had gotten hot and moved over to a different shaded side of the mountain where they could easily see us working out valley. And they picked us off. I mean, no sooner than we had like popped out the side where they were on, there was a ram on the top, like just pegged us. And we sort of stopped. He stood up, and Mark's suggestion was just keep walking in like in an unthreatening way. Just act like you're hiking. Just keep walking down valley. So we did. Got down valley, came back and looked up, and they had all just rebedded. So that was a great lesson for me, and it was like a great lesson in it's not blown, right? I mean, and for
Hmm.
the most part, if you're not out there, you know, acting anxious and scrambling and doing all of this, that, and the other, they're probably not either. And so we ended up seeing them bedded at the top, made a game plan to start climbing after a while, and thankfully they had gradually worked themselves back around to the front side. And so we had 2 options. One, we could either go up a drainage where we had a little bit more of the wind, or circle back around and come over the top. So when they had went back over to feed on the front side of that, we elected to go up this drainage where we had the wind and they couldn't see us anymore. So
Yeah.
big, it's a fairly big ascent up, and we tried to stick to any of the creek beds that we could to try to keep where it's cool, and at that point everything's still blowing down because it's
Yep.
it's noon or whatever. Um, So yeah, we started to climb. And at this point, I'm still thinking we're sheep viewing. Like no reason for me to get anxious or nervous or whatever. He didn't tell me until after the fact, but he had seen that one was for sure full curl. And this is one of the reasons I'll say, like, another reason I'll say he's a tremendous guide. He's everything I would think you want a guide to be. Is he never told me, because I think he knew, number one, it's only gonna like work nerves. Like there's no
Mhm.
reason to have someone thinking that. Number two, I don't know. Like if I get over there and we're close enough and I have to say like I actually think he's not, the letdown that would be. So I appreciated the fact of him not giving me any inclination that any of these or anything. He stuck to, and in my mind I stuck to, they're all sublegal until they're not. And he's a good enough. I mean, he's a great friend. He's a great guy. I trust him tremendously. So for me, even if I had gotten up there and looked and thought, "Oh no, he is," I don't care what you say. Like I was 100% committed to doing whatever he told me because it's him, right? I mean, this is all on him.
Yeah.
Whatever happens, and as a friend and just whatever else, like I wanted it to be good for him too. So yeah, made our way up to the top, which was quite the climb. And so I can't remember how many feet we climbed, but it doesn't matter. We climbed all the way to the top. There's snow, and we are at the peak of this. And it is awesome, dude. It is awesome. So we get to the peak prominence, and there's a little hill with snow on it, and the wind at the top is blowing fairly good. So we strip off our packs, get on our stomachs, slowly edge over this peak, and you can see all 11 lambs and ewes bedded, feeding just below us, and all 5 rams next to them. I mean, I could have sat there and watched them all day. It was, I mean, it was something I'll never forget. So you're laying in the snow, the wind is ripping, you're watching these lambs and ewes and rams feed off the top of this mountain, and it's just like this surreal experience. I still have no idea if any of them are legal yet or not, and I like at that point I wasn't even thinking about that. Like it was awesome, just awesome to take in.
Dang.
So
How
we're
does
up
that,
here.
I was
Oh,
gonna say,
go
how does
ahead.
that progress then? Because you're not yet in legal ram, getting behind a rifle, whatever, like kill mode.
Yeah,
You're in amazing sight, place, setting, wild sheep, soak it in mode. But
yeah.
how does it progress to like flip that switch, or does it yet?
He starts to take off the spotter off of the pack. I'm like, oh, there's my cue.
Yeah.
So I take the rifle off, and like we're high enough where if I mean, they could easily see us on the top of the peak. So you're still having to be fairly strategic about how you crawl around. You can't make any crazy movements or whatever. So I go get my rifle. He gets the spotter out. And again, like I understand this doesn't happen much. I had practiced all summer building shooting positions, different shooting positions, shooting off of sticks, shooting off of packs, shooting all sorts of different ways. But I'm on top of this peak, prone on a bipod, and these sheep are 170 yards away. I've got a rear bag that was really just my puffy gloves and a pair of wool gloves in a stuff sack. So, I mean, I was in the most ideal situation you could possibly find yourself in. So he gets set up on the spotter, and they eventually stand up and start feeding back towards us, which sounds great, but I'm already at such an angle that if I shoot any more down, I'm going to be shooting rocks in front of me, not like it's such an
Mhm.
angle that I had to reposition. So we ended up repositioning, and he's not saying anything. He's not like saying
Was he just in the glass much? I mean, he was
yes.
just
Yeah,
okay.
he was in the glass, but at this point you've got a total of 16 sheep feeding. So you've
Yeah,
got lambs and ewes feeding, they're all standing
milling
up, the rams are
around.
feeding, milling around, and they're clustered to some degree. And he's like, I'm half expecting him to be inaudibly under his breath counting rings, or like, well, hold on, do you see the one on the right, or anything. He's not saying anything at all. But I can tell in the scope, I can tell which two are obviously sublegal, and I can tell which three are potentials. But I can also tell of the three, there's one that's noticeably bigger than the others. And I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean he's legal, right? You could have a
Hmm.
smaller 8-year-old ram and you could have a really, big mass that's sub 8 years old and not full curl. But I
Hmm.
thought if he's going to give me the clear on any, it'll probably be him. So that's the only one that I was watching in the scope. And I swear to you, 25 minutes had to go by, and I'm sure it was probably three. But he, like, all of the sudden, it was like a light switch went off. All of a sudden, he's like the one facing to the left in the back. He's legal. He's legal. You can take him. And I was already on it. It was the one that I was watching. So flip the safety. I was completely steady and pulled the trigger.
You said that so quick. Is that how quick it happened? Not just in terms of physicality, but like in your head.
Yep. Record the shot to see if there's impact in the ram runs, to have confidence where the hit was, not for like show and tell or anything. It's just, it's good to be able to go back and have an idea of where it was. He told me later, he was like, I didn't even get the first one because you were already, before I could flip from video to record, you'd already shot. So I'd been watching him, and he cleared from the other sheep. I flicked the safety off, and I'd been shooting. I had never felt more confident with a rifle because I'd been shooting all summer long. And usually, I'm fiddling with positioning and getting my bubble ready and all these things. And I just, in fact, he was like, do you want to dry fire something? I was like, no, I don't. I'm, I don't think it's going to give me anything extra. And at that point, I'd already had one chambered, and, fiddling with the rifle to me was more of a risk than dry firing. So when he gave me the clear, I shot once. The whole group kind of dispersed, but they stood there like they didn't really know what was going on. He was still like he was up, but then he would, like, his knees were buckling and he was clearly going to go down. But for me, one of the things, like, I've really learned from guys like Dione and Brian and you and guys who are a lot more experienced in shooting than me was just, there's no reason to hesitate. If that's still happening, just create the insurance and go ahead, and if you get the clear to put another one in. So I'd already chambered another one, shot again, and that was it. He immediately went down, and that entire group still just kind of stood there. And eventually, once we got up and they saw us, they ended up going away. But yeah, man, it was the most surreal experience I've ever had. It was Chris's birthday, so, like, for whatever
Oh, no
reason,
way.
yeah, whatever reason, he's not been on a sheep hunt in a couple of years. So, like, this was really, it was in a unique way really special to all of us. Like, nobody
Yeah.
ever really said that, but you could just get this sense about it. So when I shot him, for whatever reason, like, I just kept saying, like, "Happy birthday, dude! Happy birthday!" And of course, he's like, he's congratulating me or whatever. And yeah, it was the coolest, most surreal experience, I've ever had. It's like in that moment, this is gonna sound really cliche in Disney, but it's like the memory of all the work in the summer of finding time to go shoot and to making sure you're ready, and even moving stuff in the house and trying to juggle all of the things, and the sacrifice from Lindsay and time away from the boys. It's like all of a sudden you get this relief from all of that stress and the memory and the gratitude, and I just had and still have this immense sense of humility and gratitude to be able to participate in it and to go there. Like, it's just a really hard feeling to describe,
Yeah.
when it all comes together. And, like, I'd obviously been on a lot of hunts to this point, so I knew what was to come, which is the best part, right? It's like processing and late night pack out. You're not getting back to camp until 1. And I love processing and packaging the meat. And one thing I've not talked about yet that I was as looking forward to as a part of all of this was I was really, really hoping to be able to participate in getting it plugged. Like, you obviously have to have success and then you get it plugged. I wanted to, like, to me, I was really wanted to be a part of that. And so, yeah, I think just like all of it coming together in that moment was, it was overwhelming. It was awesome.
Dang. I don't know if you have any thoughts on this. It could be very simple. The the most like critical, important shot of your life, right? In terms of investment and time and money and energy and whatever. Was none of that on your mind at that point and you were just calm because you weren't thinking about it? Or did you have to like push any of those thoughts out of your head? Does that question make sense?
It makes perfect sense. I am typically the one who has to force stuff like that out of my head. But for the weight that this carried, I had none of that. And I
Hmm.
think that that was number one because of Mark. He wasn't anxious. He wasn't rushing me. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't hurried. He wasn't, telling me it's full curl and we got to run. We got to do all like
Hmm.
we had potential other Rams we could go see. Like and the second piece of that was you leading into this, your advice to me of you just need to go be selfish. You need to not let any of all of the things that normally stress you out creep in and just go experience it, and if you happen to get the opportunity at a sheep hill, then that's great, but don't go into it thinking that's the end point. And I did. I mean, when I was there and in the time leading up to that, like I made that a priority to myself of you're going to have an awesome adventure. I was as excited about getting more experience in the backcountry in a kind of like next level
Hmm.
and what that would mean for my hunting here in the lower 48 too, as I was anything else. So, like we've talked about before with the death hike preparation, for me, one of the greatest joys with the death hike is the prep work going into it. I love that part of it. And this was the same way. So, in a lot of ways, like I enjoyed the entire process of it, beginning to end, as opposed to just thinking it's this one shot. And I
Hmm.
think that, the combination of all of those things is what made it, um, when it came time, I was very much not myself. I was very unanalytical about it. And like, you've shot a million times this summer. Just click the safety. This is no different.
Hmm.
And it wasn't.
Yeah, you're just executing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's very much not me. So I don't know I wish I had like follow me for more tips here and like could give somebody the takeaway on how to develop that. I don't know. It was just maybe it's the preparation, right? Or good friends
Yeah.
or both. But um, yeah, no, there was to answer your question. It's a long-winded way of just saying I didn't have to force anything out about the pressure of the shot at all.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, Mark's demeanor definitely is calming for sure, right? And I've noticed that because I've not just on guided hunts, but I've just been a part of situations where there's multiple people in a shot opportunity and there's some level of like excitement or even pressure before the shot, right? And I've seen what that does to the shooter. I've been on
Yeah,
the behind the rifle or behind the bow, but then I've also been part of a group dynamic where someone's like super amped and I'm thinking like this is way too much hype and excitement for the
yeah,
shooter and it's going to create negative effects and in some instances it has. So just being able to like yeah, do what you said, like stay calm and execute on everything you've put in the preparation for is definitely makes a massive difference. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I've been in situations like that too, and you're just like you're unsettled. You're pulling everything on the gun, and like there's one thing that I've learned. I mean, I love the art and the science of shooting and bullet trajectory. Like I just the nerd science half of my brain loves that. One of the greatest things I've learned is just the simple idea of the more steady it's like a tool, right? Like one of the keys I enjoy woodworking. One of the keys that I've learned in building stuff is you just have to have the right tool rather than, trying to make your
Hmm.
way with two or three. This is the same way. If you put everything in good positioning, the tool will do the job. But if you're scattered all over the place and unsettled and, jerking things, like you can't hit the broadside of a barn. And so, just being able to, I think again, the practice piece of it and then just do it.
Yeah. I don't, you and I have talked. In fact, we we talked right after this happened. You sent me a message letting me know that you got a RAM. And I told you before the hunt, I was like, Kyle, please send me as many updates as possible. And if you want me to pay for your unlimited enReach plan for this month, I will, just because I was like wanting to be a part of getting updates on this hunt. So it was cool to hear that you got a RAM. What was the next hour like in terms of, okay, RAM goes down, hugs and high fives with, Mark and Chris and happy birthdays. Um, did it begin to feel real over the course of that time?
uh, no, I don't think that it did. Obviously we were way at the top, so we dropped down and I had no idea what to expect. Like these are different than mule deer and elk. Like I've been on a lot of mule deer and elk hunts and been with people who have, harvested stuff that wasn't mine, so I've seen them. I've never seen one of these, right? Like I had
Hmm.
no idea what to expect, and so I would imagine Mark probably thought it was like a kid because I just go down there and like I'm just in awe of them. And stupid as this will sound, I'm interested. Like I'm inspecting every piece of it. He's got these like unique chips out of his horns, which I would imagine every ram does. Every one that I've seen kind of has these unique features, and it just makes you wonder how'd they get there. What are winters like for him, and the thickness of the fur and like the hooves, and there's just so many pieces of it that you're just looking and or at least I was, and admiring. We had daylight, and so like none of us were in a rush, and so we just kind of I think took it all in and took pictures of we all got together and took pictures. And this was the only thing Lindsay told me that I could have in the house as far as like an actual mount or anything. So it took a lot of time and precision to make sure that we preserved all of that, and then quartered the meat and loaded up the packs. And at this point, I think the shot was at like I don't know 2 or 3 in the afternoon. At this point, it's starting to get dark, and I love some late night. Like, well, if I know if I know the route, I love late night heavy packs. This got a little bit dicey in a few situations, but like now that I'm at home in the moment, it's dicey, and you're kind of like, oh man, I hope this works out. I think if those things aren't there, it's a different experience.
Yeah.
And it's like in the moment, yeah, you're a little bit, I guess, nervous or whatever. But had I had a trail down, I don't know that I would feel the way that I do. And I would much prefer those, quote, dicey situations as opposed to just this smooth trail or something off the side of a road or something easy or whatever. And so, yeah, we packed the meat and had a long drop off to the bottom and ended up working our way back to camp. And they were, they probably both hate me if they hear this. I apologize. They were, we had to take so the route that we were going to go out, we passed through on the way back to camp. Like we could leave the meat here and then we'll just pick it up in the morning. We'd seen a grizzly with a cub coming in, and they're like, we can take it back to camp too. It's up to you, but I think it'll be okay here. It's like you guys are gonna hate me, and Chris, it's after midnight. Your birthday's over, but I think I'd feel a
Your
lot
birthday's
better.
over.
I think I'd feel a lot better if it probably would have been fine. But in my mind, also, I was thinking, man, like I don't want to risk potentially losing a little bit, if not most of this meat. So we ended up hauling it all back up to camp. And I think by the time we, got some dinner in us and went to bed, it was almost 1. It was awesome. So, I mean, awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, special. Like I've been there and like just soaking in hearing your experience reminds me of my experience. And those are special times. I'm like you in the sense that like when you shoot something it's not over. It's to me, it's like this is the beginning of the real. Like this is the
Yeah.
beginning of I don't know, the hunt, obviously, but I don't know, the beginning of my favorite part of the hunt, right? Like
Y-
putting your hands on that animal and taking care of that meat and heavy packs and figuring out how you're gonna get out. I mean, I love all that.
Yeah, I think I'm in a unique boat in the sense of like I didn't grow up hunting, and I've only been hunting for a little over a decade or whatever. I think, my perception of hunting and most of the people that I knew was like hunters live for the moment that you pull the trigger. And that is just, I mean, no one I know or that we know that is true of. Like, I don't know anybody that hunts for that moment. If anything, that's like their least favorite moment. It's everything before and after that makes you love it and want to come back. And so you're 100% right. You asked a minute ago, like, when did it dawn on me? I think the next morning like the work was done. We had a long pack out with, still 7 days of food and everything to get out. So it was going to be heavy. And so we weren't in any rush, kind of slept in, and Mark slept in a while, and I was just by myself on the mountain in the morning, which was great. I mean, I love that, having coffee, breakfast, just looking over the mountains. And, obviously the Ram is up there too. And like, I think it was at that point where I was kind of just in awe of everything, the country, the species, our experience to that point, knowing what's going to come. We've got a massive haul out of here with this thing, plus camp, plus food. And I mean, I just love it. I, I told Lindsay, I told Lindsay when I got home, I was like, it's, I can't not go back having had experience. Like, obviously, it may not be on a sheep hunt, but it's almost cruel to me to think that you'll never be able to go in there ever again and experience something like that. It doesn't have to be that species necessarily, but to go experience that. And there's places I feel like that about in Idaho and other places I've hunted too, but it's almost cruel to think you won't be able to experience that again because it's just like, ah, man, I don't know how to describe it without sounding cliche or stupid, but it's just like it's the only thing that makes me feel like that, Like you just
Hmm.
can't duplicate it, and I don't know many people that don't want to go back.
I can attest.
I know you can't.
It was like you describing all that, all of the last part of this. And then you mentioned like it was the one animal ahead of time that Lindsay was like, yeah, like let's mount this thing, get it in the house, do taxidermy. I don't, I just know you and I know your experience. Not that I was there on yours or lived it, but had a very similar experience on mine. And it's not just the animal that's so cool and unique, which they are. Like you said, like your ram is different than every other ram. Like that's one thing I love about, you know, um, horned animals such as sheep versus antlers. Like elk drop antlers and they grow every year, new set of antlers. And they're going to have some characteristics, right, to grow in similar ways or whatever. But it's one thing, like there's a bull right next to me I can think of, and he's really cool. He's all broken up and busted up, and I can look at that cool bull elk and go, oh man, I wonder what broke that tine and
Yeah,
how this happened to you and whatever. But that's like only a snapshot of that year. Whereas with sheep, like you have these horns and it's like their life and it's their story
yeah,
and all of the wear and chips and everything is like a story, not just of antlers in one year, but of their life.
yeah,
And that's just on the animal front. But then for you to then have this mount in the future, again, it's something that non-hunters can't understand.
yeah,
But for you to be able to have that and relive that story in that place and look at that ram and let that be a very tangible call back to everything you just said is such a cool thing. Like I don't know, I guess animals are cool to look at. I'm not super into taxidermy. Most of my stuff's just euros. So whether it is or isn't like full on taxidermy versus the euro, whatever that is, that physical representation of the memories and the experience and the adventure is just something that non-hunters definitely don't understand. They just see like, oh, those guys with a trophy on the wall. It's like, nope, not it at all.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's 100% true. For me, it's a representation of, in a lot of ways, like where I was at in life. The last 5 years, 3 years, whatever, since my dad died have been probably the hardest of my life. So for me, it's the last thing that it is a trophy, and it's more of just a representation of a memory that I would probably, I'll never forget the rest of my life. And that's also why, like, I think a lot of there have been people who have asked, well, why haven't you talked about it? Like, why haven't you said you're going on this sheep hunt and had podcasts about training and all this? And I think for me is like it just cheapened it, and it would have
Hmm.
made me wonder, are you going on this for promotional stuff for Valley to Peak or for you or for, like it to me, it just really cheapened the opportunity. And in some ways, it's going to sound stupid, but cheapened the species. And like it just like I didn't want to talk about it. I wanted to just go. I had some people approach me about filming it, and I said, I don't want to. Like, I don't want to have to be out there and thinking about repeating different positions and walk ups and smiling a
Hmm.
certain way and staring at it longer and perfect shots and video recordings for promotion. I don't want to. I want to just go and
Hmm.
experience it. And like it's almost emotional, as stupid as that sounds, but um, I could not have scripted it to be a better experience than it was. And a lot of that has to do with Mark and Chris. A lot of that has to do with the country. Obviously, sheep are amazing animals, but yeah, it was awesome. It was awesome. So I'll cut to the chase. Pack out. Now we're at like
I was
what
gonna
day?
say you're two like you were coming in and it was all of 2 very long days.
Yep.
And now you have that plus a ram.
Yep. And so we were planning, I think even longer to come out. But so day one, we're at day five. We pack up. We've got camp. We've got the sheep. We've got everything on us. And there's a fair amount of climbing to get out of the mountains and kind of back down into the tundra, and then obviously drop back down even lower than that. And Mark was having no stops. He was like in fact, to the point of where, like, when we would stop, we'd get water, but I wouldn't eat anything because I thought, as soon as I would get ready to go eat, he'd be loading up again. So we just made a big push that day to get out, and basically we're eating on the go, and put a big, like, I think it was almost 12 hours in that day with, the sheep camp food that we had left, etc. We did, like, about 2 or 3 hours into that, start getting some good old Alaska weather. And so, we're on the top of this ridge. It's already sprinkling. You look at the clouds, and they look like they're moving fairly fast. We're like, yeah, let's not put rain gear on. Let's just keep going. We get cold, wet, real fast. And we're on the top of the ridge, so the wind is blowing, and we eventually stop and throw on rain gear. But, like, you just don't care. It doesn't matter at that point. A tornado could have come through, and I think we all still would have been, happy. But that day was definitely challenging because everything's wet. You're climbing a lot. You're moving through that tussocks, and it's just everything is hard. Every step you take, you sink down. And but it again, I think that's what makes it so rewarding. So big 10, 12 hour day, make camp, have dinner, and the northern lights blow up that night. It was like a bow on top of an already awesome trip. It's late, and after we get done hiking, we're making dinner. Both of them had went to bed, and I look up and kind of see like this green. I probably wouldn't have thought anything of it otherwise until I realized, like, that could potentially be the northern lights. So Mark's awake. I ask him, and as soon as he comes out, they're going nuts. I mean, there's some pictures online if people are interested. You can kind of get an idea of what they look like. I just speechless, man. I mean, to have had that experience the last 5 or 6 days, you put 10 to 12 hours in, you're eating dinner, you're getting ready to go to bed, and you look up and you've got like green, purples, and pinks just like dancing out across the sky is just, I, I don't even know how to describe it. It's just, it's awesome. It's awesome.
Yeah, the first time I saw them, I didn't know much about them. I knew they existed, right, and had seen photos. I had no idea that they like moved. And it was just mind blowing to me. My first trip to Alaska, we had a very cool hunt day, similar situation, super heavy pack out, very late night, well into the dark, and get back to camp. And then it was almost like, I mean, looking back at it now, I want to say within minutes of taking our heavy packs off, the Northern Lights come out. It probably wasn't. It was a half hour, hour later or whatever. Wasn't that majestical, but dude, just seeing them and like watching them move and shift and change in size and color and direction is like I had no idea
Yeah.
what this experience is like, and it is unbelievable.
Yeah, we had this like layer of clouds below them, which almost added like this smoke to it. It was awesome. It was awesome. So ended up going to bed that night, braced for the pack out the next day, which, by all accounts, the first day was fairly straightforward and easy, and made our way out. And I think we got out, it was roughly, I don't know, 2, 3 in the afternoon. And, you sit back down in the truck and everything's loaded. You get like a fresh change of clothes on and you start driving back and like it just all settles on you. Right. And so we drove in and went and got something to eat, which like a hot meal after being out there was great. Make our, start making our way back, and they were closed. Obviously, fishing games closed on a Monday. We came out on a Saturday, so I knew that I would, be at least there till Tuesday, and so spent the next couple of days processing meat, getting it frozen, and then made some plans to go to fishing game on Tuesday to get it plugged.
Dang, man. So cool. It's what's what's interesting is like this is pretty fresh to you, you know? And I know
Yeah,
like we were talking before you recorded this that you came back into a whirlwind of life and family and catching up on work and house stuff and whatever. So being able to like have this conversation and relive it, you know,
yeah,
while it's fresh is awesome. But what's cool as well is just the fact that it didn't end there, it doesn't end here, but experiences like this you get to like relive and think about and all that for really months and years to come. And yeah, I don't again, I'm like hesitating, trying not to be cliche or sound silly either. And this isn't just about sheep hunting, so I don't want people to hear this only in the context of sheep hunting. But I know from my experience, I can hear it in your voice and see it in your eyes because we have video on. Like, this is a life-changing type thing. And it doesn't define your life. Like, it doesn't, you know, make you, well, it actually does kind of make you a different person, but it's not life-defining, but it is life-changing. Again, I'm not saying this for listeners to say like only Dall sheep hunting or only Alaska, but just this culmination of, at the end of the day, I know for you, Kyle, this was a next level hunt in terms of remoteness and adventure and everything else. And when we continue to pursue something that is like a step ahead of where we're at, by definition, that is life changing, right?
yeah.
Because we are becoming someone new and developing new capabilities and having new experiences that we can't now, but we can if we pursue. And by definition, that changes us, right? And it's just such a cool thing to me.
Yeah, I mean, you and I haven't, like, you've actually not even heard the story. I mean, we've talked a little bit, but you've not heard the full story of it. So this is, like, you didn't know this was coming, and it's sort of ironic with the project that you guys have going called The Experience. But that is what I cherish the most about this. And again, like, I'm not a lifelong hunter. And if you had told me a decade ago or whenever, I started hunting that it's going to be a decade of experience before you ever feel even a little bit confident in the woods. I don't know that I would have embarked on it. There was a lot of naivety there, thankfully, that I didn't know about. But every time, like what I've learned in those 10 years is every time you go out, you're getting a little more experience. And what you see all of these guys have that you want who have been hunting for years can only be had by going. You can't read it. Like I read about it forever. You can't like there's only so much you can get before you just have to go and experience it. And you walk away with the experience itself, which this definitely was. But I think even more importantly, like you're talking about here, it's a different degree and a different level of confidence that through repetition over many years helps you become what it was that you wanted to be when you first started, right? But you can only like that's one of the things that I think I've come to love so much about all of this, not just Alaska, not just Dall sheep, is it's the accumulation of going out for day hunts for mule deer to elk hunts to long, extended trips with stock and horses. Like it's all of those things, and I'm grateful for all of it, including this one. Appreciate you guys listening to the podcast. If you have any questions as you listen to that I can help with, I would be more than happy to help. You can send me an email, whether that's logistics on how to get up there or food or training that I did in 3 months that I had to prepare for that. I would be happy to review some of that. I will say that I will be documenting a lot more of this, specifically the training and the nutrition and some of the preparation type of stuff that I did both before, during, and after the hunt. Because there is a lot of logistics whenever you're, planning to go up there for an extended period of time. And obviously, the Dall sheep hunt is really known for the physicality of maybe any other hunt. And so I had to adjust my training and wanted to be sure that I give some good information on how I did that. So that will be coming probably throughout the rest of the fall, even into some of the late months of 2024, maybe even into 2025, early spring type of stuff. So yeah, if you have any direct questions that come to mind as you listen to that, feel free to email me, info@v2pnutrition.com. I have also put together a spreadsheet with what I took for food on most days, as well as a gear list, because I know people like reading that, or there may be people in the future that are looking for information on sheep hunts in Alaska and just find it to be a good, useful resource. So that's in the show notes. You can click that, get a direct link to it, so you can check that out if you are interested. We will be back again here in another couple of weeks with more episodes. Hope you guys are able to get out and enjoy what fall we've got left, which is just kicking off. So it should be quite a bit. We'll talk to you again in a couple weeks.